Hey, I'm comedian, podcaster, teacher, Joel Byars, based out of Atlanta, Georgia, host of the Hot Breath podcast. Ready for a good interview. I'm from Summerville, Georgia, or Shumble, if you're from there. But I got out of there quick. The roads were paved in meth. So we decided to come towards Atlanta where there's Adderall. And it's really kind of been living most of my life around the Atlanta area. My whole brand of comedy is educated entertainment. That's what my focus has been, that when people come to my show, I want to make sure they're going to laugh, but also learn. Comedy I've always loved. I've always been a fan ever since seeing Sinbad in afros and bell bottoms with his earring and jumpsuit. But I first did comedy, according to my mother, at a church play when I was like 6. I stole the mic from a lady and just started, bah, bah, bah. Apparently I killed. So that's still been my best gig since. But after that, I didn't actually start pursuing comedy until senior year of college. It was second semester. I had nothing else to lose. So I just figured, hey, you're going to graduate with a liberal arts degree. Why not disappoint your parents a little bit more, start stand-up comedy, and I haven't looked back since. Yeah, I've done both improv and sketch. I've taken improv and sketch classes and performed live and on film in both. I love all comedy. I think that's what's the best part about creativity in general, is just each one informs itself. So techniques you learn in sketch can translate to stand-up, they can translate to improv, or even techniques you learn in painting or dancing, they can all kind of translate towards each other. I just try to live a creative life, but definitely comedy is the vehicle to do that. Part of the grind of a comedian is you're still doing open mics, but comedy is a language, and you have to be on stage to exercise it, and the more you're on stage, the better you get, the more fluent you get at comedy. So I've been doing it a little over 9 years now. February 1st, 2019 was my 9-year anniversary. But it's all been the same mission since the beginning, that I wanted to create universal comedy. Since I started, I wanted to make sure I created comedy that I could do at a church, that I do at a bar, that I do at a college, that I do at a corporate event, that I do at a strip club. I have performed at a strip club for chicken wings, and I won the competition and lost respect of my family. But otherwise, since the beginning, my mission has been to just make sure my comedy is universal and can entertain as many people as possible. And just over time, just like any other skill you do, you just get better and more proficient at it. But I have by no means mastered comedy. It's a lifelong, you'll hear comedians like 20, 30 years in who are still saying, I think I'm starting to figure this out. It's a lifelong journey, but in 9 years, it's still just like light years from where I started. This is it. I mean, I have done everything else. I mean, I've worked at Enterprise. I don't know if can we say cuss words on here? Enterprise is an expletive in my household, but it's so bad. And I've like washed dishes and done landscaping, and like I've dabbled around. Comedy is the baby. Difficulties. Well, getting paid. If you're doing comedy to get paid, do something else. I just did an interview with Joe Byars, who runs the World Series of Comedy, on my podcast, Hot Breath. And he said that was his main takeaway. He's been doing it 25 years. He's worked with thousands of comics, and he's like, you don't do it for the money. Getting paid is like, you get paid in stage time. I've driven 12 hours one way for $100. That's probably the biggest obstacle comedians face early on. I had a student one time, it was like week 3 of the class, and she was like, so when do we get paid? And I was like, I will pay you a refund of your tuition right now, because you're not gonna make it. If that's your mindset going into it, there's gotta be a bigger purpose. So the biggest hurdle is getting paid, but it's also something with comedy, you wanna make sure you have something worth getting paid to do. You don't wanna get paid $200 to do this show that then you never get rebooked to do because you're not ready. So it's time, and getting paid is the biggest hurdle. Getting stage time can be a hurdle as well. It's one of those things you kind of have to pay your dues as you go along. But it's all earned. And comedy, and I've done over 170 interviews with comics, and comedy always takes care of you. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to, and me personally, like, I did a show in Asheville for a certain amount of money, and then that week, my car broke down. Like, the alternator pooped out, and that was just enough money to pay to replace that. So there's weird, eerie happenings that occur in your comedy journey that just kind of keep you like, okay, I guess I'm on the right track. The comedy scene in Atlanta is the booming scene of the country right now. Every city has had, there's been like Chicago has had its time, Denver has had it, Boston has had its time. Atlanta is up next. A lot of these comedians you're seeing on television right now are from Atlanta, or a lot of these shows you're seeing on TV right now are being written by comedians from Atlanta. People are coming to Atlanta for the talent, for the comedy, to hire them. People are moving to Atlanta to either start their comedy career or to just get into the scene of it. They're coming from smaller cities and they're moving to Atlanta to actually start to take their comedy to the next level. There's shows every night of the week. You can perform multiple times a week. We have several clubs. In most cities, maybe like they have one. We have, I think, 4. I think we have 4. But beyond just the clubs, there's independent shows that are run nightly. And not only are there great comedy shows, the comedy fans here. I think that's the secret sauce of Atlanta, is that when you come to a comedy show, there's actually real comedy fans there that are engaged in the show, and they're not by accident. So I actually started my podcast to showcase comedians from Atlanta. Then it's since grown into just like a comedy mastery platform, but it all started with Atlanta comedy and continues to be like the heart of it. It's kind of a melting pot of creativity going on here in the city. Whether it is, the tech space here in Atlanta is like booming right now. A lot of people are coming here for the tech. The art world in general is booming. There's a lot of startups happening here. I think the city itself has a lot of positive momentum. The location is, location helps. It was known as Terminus. It was known as like a hub, and it is the world's busiest airport. So there is certain just geographical advantages we have, but I think the city overall has a spirit to it that just kind of nurtures that kind of creativity, which is what helps the comedy scene. Pretty much every brewery in the city has a show right now, so I would say go to those. Any of the clubs, Uptown is the oldest, most historic urban club in the country. Punchline is one of the oldest comedy clubs in general in the country. Laughing Skull right now is probably one of the most well-respected comedy clubs in the country. Like people trout Dave Chappelle comes through there. So many. Tiffany Haddish was just yet there. That's really kind of one of the buzz spots of comedy right now, is the Laughing Skull. And Atlanta Comedy Theater is actually run by a comedy legend who has built other comedy clubs. So there's a good pedigree within the comedy club scene, but as far as independent shows go, I would say any brewery. The one I'd probably recommend the most would be the last Saturday of every month. There's a show called Comedy the Game Show, hosted by Joel Byars. We'll be there at last Saturday of every month, 5 p.m. Come on out. See comedians competing for a prize. There's audience giveaways, sponsors. If you'd like to sponsor, please DM me, my manager, aka wife. And really, you could take your pick on the best shows, but in general, whichever one you pick, you're gonna have a good time. Especially at the game show, hosted by me. I'm Joel Byars. You probably already forgot, but we'll put that in the lower thirds just to add pressure to the editor. Right here, Byars. Okay, spelled B-Y-A-R-S, not E-R-S. That's when I'll know I made it, when my name is spelled right. When it's not B-Y-E-R-S. I just got a flight today, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a big deal. They're flying me somewhere, and it was B-Y-E-R-S. And I was just like, not yet. I love it, though. Ooh, local comedians to pay attention to. Some of my favorites, Sam Severin is one of my favorites for sure. David Perdue is another good one. Who's that? Dedrick Flynn. I just did a show with Dedrick Flynn. He's a wild man on stage. He's just crazy. Just commits. I like seeing comedians that are authentically them and are unapologetic about it. So like I don't get turned off if comedy is like dirty, or as long as it's true to like that person, and it's like I can tell it's them being authentically just their true self and not just trying to say something shocking for the sake of reaction, then I gravitate towards authenticity on stage. So those people I listed, and I'm sure I've forgotten others. Andrew Stanley's another good one, who's a younger comic who has already just made leaps in his career. He's already been able to like quit his job and like tour around. There are so many comics, and I feel bad that I'm going to leave someone out, but those are a few, but there are several more. If I forgot you, I'm talking about you. Most of you. Some of you, stay at Enterprise. Internationally, I've been all the way as far as Japan. Just in it, America, I've performed everywhere. I've been all the way out to LA, I've been to New York, I've been to Huntsville, been to Kokomo, Indiana, Indianapolis, Nashville. Haven't really been in Indianapolis and Kokomo were my two Midwest introductions. I want to get up there more. There's a lot of good comedy going on up there. But you just kind of travel wherever, whenever you can. Panama City, not trying to brag, but did comedy in Panama City. And I was sober. Because I did spring break there and have been sober ever since. Because again, I disrespected my family's name there. Trying to think of anywhere else. Arizona, performed in like Phoenix, Arizona. You just go where you're summoned. You're kind of like a mercenary. It's like, where you want to go? Or like, where's my next gig? And you just go. As a comedian, you're always on call. I know I balance my personal life and my comedy life, but I know sometimes I'm at home and it's 7 and I'm like, there could be a call that's like, hey, I have a show at 9, someone just canceled, can you come? And I'll be like, yeah, sorry honey, I can't finish Game of Thrones, but enjoy British Bake Off. It's for the 3rd time. We have watched that quite a few times. I would be way further in my career if it wasn't for Great British Bake Off. If only comedy were that easy. I just need some fancy music and pastries. That's what I'm gonna start doing my comedy. But I performed pretty much all around the country, and that's part of the grind of a comedian. I interviewed a guy named Drew Thomas who has performed in 48 states. That's it. That's just the life, really. Most of comedy, what I've learned, and what I've learned from interviewing so many people, is your network. The comedians you meet are the ones that are really going to find the most work for you. So you can't have an agent and a manager, get opportunities that way, but most of your opportunities are gonna come from other comics you've met. So really, no, I'm independent, I'm unrepresented. I'm trying to Chance the Rapper this-ish. But it's all been pretty much other comics just saying, hey, I have this gig, would you like to do it? Or it's a referral. It's really all come from just being in the right place, the right time, and just being top of mind, and being funny. So many comedians complain, oh, I'm not getting booked. I was like, well, why aren't you funnier? It's like, put the funny first. Anyway, comics, if you're not funny, don't try to get booked yet. Just get good first. That's it. Comedy's booming right now. So there's scenes. I was recently in Nashville. Great scene up there. A lot of great shows, a lot of great comedy fans. There's good comedy almost everywhere you can go. So a lot of the other comedy scenes compared to Atlanta are still good. I was just in Nashville. There's a great scene up there, a lot of great shows. I've performed in smaller circuits, like Chattanooga, even Indianapolis. There's comedy's booming right now. So there's good comedy everywhere. I may be a little biased saying Atlanta's the best right now, but I just know that in thinking of the old way was you got to move to LA or New York to make it. But in all reality, you can do it from your hometown now. So that's why my whole goal has been to build here in Atlanta, build my own brand, build my own opportunities, and then go to LA or New York when it's for a job and not to go start over. Because I've had friends that have made the leap, who have moved to LA and New York, and they're I mean, they've since gone on to be on Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel and write for great TV shows, but part of the grind was them living in like a 1-bedroom apartment with like 4 dudes for like several years. So that's their journey. Awesome. That's definitely not what I was looking to get out of comedy. So the encouraging thing for anyone starting comedy right now is you can create your own opportunities regardless of what your scene is. I mean, just going to LA and performing at the Comedy Store is something I think every comedian should make the pilgrimage to the Comedy Store in LA, because you're there, it's a piece of comedy history, and you're just hanging out there, and you just see like, oh, there's Joe Rogan. Oh wait, Whitney Cummings just walked by. Oh, Aziz Ansari's here. Wait, Dave Chappelle's in the other room. He's doing 2 hours. Like, that's every night of the week at this place. So I definitely recommend comedians make the pilgrimage to LA, get to the Comedy Store. So that's like a highlight, but a low light is driving to Kokomo, Indiana for $100 up and back. So that's driving up there, doing the show, no hotel, driving back 12 hours, taking a nap around 6 a.m. the next day. It was with me and another comedian named Ronnie Jordan, who he hates that I tell this story, but it is like, that's like the moment in my comedy career where I was like, okay, I can handle anything. If I can do this trip, I can handle anything comedy throws at me. And Ronnie Jordan's legitimately one of my favorite comedians alive. And this was also a trip where we brainstormed about Hot Breath, and we actually he helped me come up with like the structure around Hot Breath and kind of like thinking of benchmarks for episodes, because he came from a radio background, so thinking of like the entertainment structure of it, and just kind of, he really helped me to realize what was possible with the podcast. So on one hand, the trip, not much money, a lot of time, a lot of driving, but on the other hand, through that trip, I got to connect with one of my favorite comedians ever, and also develop what has become this comedy platform that is Hot Breath. So that's another example of comedy taking care of you in like, there's this trip that doesn't pay a lot and it's gonna be a lot of driving, but you then develop this relationship and this platform that has now become part of your identity. The Laughing Skull, I host my game show there at the last Saturday of every month. I host a weekly comedy competition at Atlanta Comedy Theater where 10 comics go up for a cash prize and a chance to win some weekend work at the comedy club as well. And beyond that, those are like my 2 staple shows, I guess. If you want to come see me, you can see me every Sunday in one of my comedy classes. I teach comedy classes and workshops and podcasting workshops. You can catch me in this lovely venue right here. We teach it in this blue chair. This is the only place I teach class right here. There's me and 12 other people, and they're just sitting on my lap like Santa Claus. And I just tell them, what joke do you want for Christmas? And then they tell me, and I'm like, okay, you get a refund, but I don't want you saying you took this class. That's not true. I'll take all of your money. Every other show, just kind of, you can go to my website. It's really the best way to catch up on where I'll be. JoelByersComedy.com is where I have a calendar, and that's where every week is different. That's the thing with comedy is like, especially when you're doing it full time, which I'm doing, and just trying to scrape together and just finding a way, is one week you may have 7 paid shows, another week you may not have any. Sometimes I'm just out doing open mics, Cat's Cafe on Tuesdays in Midtown. That's probably where I'm at the most consistently. It's one of the longest running shows in the city. It's run by Maurice Sims, who runs that room along with like 6 others around the city. So that's another good one. So you can catch a lot of like top talent from Atlanta, but also traveling through Atlanta. But really, my website will be the best way to see my schedule, but every week I'm gonna be out on a stage somewhere. My creative process always bounces off of one of my favorite quotes, which is like, the more personal, the more universal. So in thinking of me wanting to create universal comedy, I always go to the personal. And my real mission is to create material that only I could say. No one can steal you. There's a lot of comedians you see that like anyone could really say the joke, like to a certain degree and get away with it. That's why a lot of people stealing material can be an issue in comedy. So my goal is to be like steel proof, where it's not a material someone can even like take from me. It's like, yeah, you can take the words, but you still got to deliver it, you know, and it's diving into the personal. So if it is me being a dishwasher and a college grad, it's talking about that experience. You know, if it's me being married with a dog, it's talking about that experience. And it's all still some social commentary, but it all has to be rooted back into me and go through Joel Byars. I don't like point and poke at topics. It's more like, here's my point of view on this experience and why. But it all has to filter through you, the comedian, for it to come off as authentic, like we talked about earlier. Being authentic on stage. If you're dirty but it's authentic, then it translates. My mom hates swearing, but Dulce Sloan is one of her favorite comedians because she's just real and authentic. And also a past guest on Hot Breath. And now like a Daily Show correspondent, of course. But she started all right here in Atlanta, and she's one of those comedians I saw early on that was always uniquely her and always had her voice. And when my mom said, oh, I like Dulce, and I was like, she cusses, and she's like, yeah, but it's just so her. I was like, so there's something to just being you on stage. And then regardless of what you're saying, people will connect with it because it's personal to you. What is the Hot Breath Podcast? Only your weekly guide to comedy mastery. Ding! Pretty much what Hot Breath has evolved into, and this is something younger comics, and just younger people, or just younger people on their endeavor, not even age-wise, but just younger people pursuing whatever passion they have, is like, just the evolution of an idea. And like Hot Breath started when there were 10 comics from Atlanta on Last Comic Standing on NBC. Comics from Atlanta won it 2 years in a row. So I was like, oh, Atlanta comedy has something going on here. So I interviewed those 10 people, and then I kind of took a break with the podcast. And then I started to overthink it, so I just started interviewing comedians, and then it evolved into me interviewing just Atlanta creatives. And now it's come full circle back into just like comedy education, period. I grew up in a house of educators, so now everything I do is on the mission of just entertaining and educating. And the podcast is really for comedians, but also comedy fans that enjoy hearing the behind the scenes and like kind of how the sausage is made and like the craft side of comedy that people don't get to really see or hear about. But it's all comedy education. I'm interviewing comedians, bookers, agents, all with the mission of just getting as much insight as possible from people. And it's really built a reputation to be a podcast to come on and really get a well-researched interview with an engaged following. My favorite feedback I get from my guests, except for like, oh, you knew that? Because I'll dive in on I make sure I research my guests like I'm like writing a thesis about them. I want my interviews to be the one-stop shop for whoever my guest is. So their fans know, if I go to Hot Breath, I'm gonna hear everything I need to know about that person and more that I didn't know. So the whole mission with creating an engaged community that's kind of like a town square for comedians and comedy fans to connect is when I hear my guests reach back out and be like, dude, I had like 10 people reach out after your interview was posted saying how much they enjoyed it and how much they learned and just thanking me for being on the show. That's what motivates me. That's what keeps Hot Breath alive, is the community that's developing around it. So anytime I talk about Hot Breath, I don't like to say me, I like to say we and our, and this is something that I have learned through almost 4 years of doing it now, that it's a start as a podcast, but it's really grown into a comedy network that I have big visions for. But right now, I use it primarily as a podcast and education platform. Every Monday at 8 a.m., iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, we out here. I've gone through phases with working with people, but it's all, at the end of the day, it's just been me at the end of the day. I've had people come and go, and I've had great people that have helped me along the way, but it's all come back to just kind of me just doing it just independently, just kind of bootstrapping it. But I wouldn't be anywhere without the people I've worked with along the way. starting the podcast, I didn't even have my own equipment. I was borrowing equipment. They were also an audio engineer, so I was getting insight into how to even edit audio and put together episodes and things before I even owned equipment. So it's been a learning curve for sure, but I would recommend anyone that is doing a podcast to learn how to do it themselves. So when you do outsource any job, you can at least competently illustrate what you want them to do. Because if you just tell someone to blindly go do a job, I've just learned from experience that it can go sideways. So just dependability or timing. If I'm releasing one every Monday at 8 a.m., but then I'm relying on someone to get me the episode back by then and in time for me to schedule it so I'm not up till 4 a.m. the morning of getting it out. Notable guests on Hot Breath, Bo Burnham was probably a big one. And the crazy one about Bo Burnham was that his people reached out to me. That was another milestone in the podcast where I was like, oh, people are noticing. You can get kind of tunnel vision on what you're doing and just think it's just you. And like you think it's awesome, but it's all perception. But then his people reached out about doing an interview to promote his movie 8th Grade while he was in Atlanta. And I was just like, whoa, this is a new level. And just one of those moments in your career that's like a tent pole that like, okay, that'll carry me for another couple of years knowing that this happened. So Bo Burnham was a good one. Roy Wood Jr., who is one of the best comedians alive, and also Daily Show correspondent, he did his interview the morning after he filmed his Comedy Central special here in Atlanta. So he was up late filming 2 comedy specials, 2 like tapings of his comedy special, and got up at 7 a.m. to do the interview in his hotel lobby. That was another one where I was like, okay, the credibility is there, where comedians do see the value and are willing and wanting to like work with Hot Breath because they really believe in it. Tone Bell's another one who's starred on so many, he just came out with a Showtime special called You Can't Cancel This because he's been on so many TV shows that have been canceled that he's like starred in. This guy, he was probably the first person to teach me that like not to ever forget where you came from. And like he could have been too like whatever and be like, I don't have time to do that. But both of his interviews I did out in LA, and one of them he did on his day off. He had been filming, he had been touring, and he did it on his only day off. He did the interview. The second time we met on the CBS lot. He's the star of Fam on CBS right now. We met on the lot of CBS, and in between like takes, we went to his dressing room and recorded the first half, had to go back, and then after that, we came back and finished the interview. Like, he just taught me to just always remember where he came from and always just be a good dude. Just be nice, you know. And, I mean, some of the people I'm so happy I got to interview even before is like a Dulce Sloan, where it is like, I knew she was a star, but I got to interview her before it happened, you know, and just to see her now ascend to be just one of the most sought after comedians in comedy right now. When I look back on the catalog, it's like, wow, there are a lot of people who we kind of caught before they really hit it big. So that's always a big, appreciation I have for the podcast, that we're able to capture this moment in their career. That's just a few. There's over 170 episodes. It's hard to even just keep track of all of them, but those are a few like top of mind that I'm just like, yeah. Bo Burnham was great. Super nice guy too. And super informative interview. I was thrilled. I was just like, wait, what? And I'm at a point now, I've been doing this so long that I don't believe it until like after it's over. You know, I mean, I've had projects where I've shot a pilot and I'm like, this is it. And then it like never even happens. I just have like the shirt and the shoes that I kept from the set, where I was just like, I'm keeping these, whatever. And then like, that's all the memento I have from that whole experience. So I don't really get too excited about anything until like after it's happened. So the Bo Burnham one was definitely one. I'm like, this is cool. I'm gonna do the research, but he still may not show up, or there may be like, oh, he won't have time anymore. But when he walked through the door, I was like, okay, this is it. This is happening. Well, the process, I've calculated I've spent up to 15 hours on a single episode, from finding a guest, you know, booking them, travel, researching the guest, all the way through post-production. Like I've calculated 15 hours to do a single episode that lasts like an hour. A lot of the process is sometimes I get referrals. Like Roy Wood Jr. was actually a referral from another credible comic who was like, no, this guy's worth your time. So sometimes referrals, sometimes it's social media. A lot of the time, actually, what I'll do is I'll look to see when a comedian's going to be in town, reach out to them on social media. That has a high level of success, is just reaching out to people on social media, or going a step further, seeing they're in town, going and seeing their show, meeting them, and then asking them about the show. But a good way to book a guest is what's in it for them, really. Especially if you're going for more high-level guests, it's like, why would they spend an hour with you to talk to you? So if they have something to promote, if they are on a tour, maybe they could promote the tour. Like there's different ways you can try to add value to what they're doing, but every guest has been different. And every guest I've kind of booked uniquely, but with some of the same methods. But booking them is just half the process, really. You know, then you have to research the guest, which a lot of it comes down to also social media, diving into their social media. Also, I'm just giving away all the hot breath sauce. But you do it. That's what I love, just as a sidebar, that I love about teaching people like comedy and podcasting and pretty much everything I do and how I do it is because you still have to do it. Yeah. Everybody wants the sauce. It's like, okay, now you cook it. See how it works out. So it's all work at the end of the day. That's a big competitive advantage to anyone starting out that's wanting to excel faster, work harder than everyone else. So it does come down spending time booking the guest, spending time researching guests, whether it is through their social media, it's through their websites, it's through previous interviews they've done, blog articles, just diving headfirst into everything this person has done. And then creating, of course, kind of a structure around that in terms of like how you want to organize the interview. I have evolved a long way from literally I would have like a set list, like my comedy, where I'm like, I'm starting here, and then we're talking about this, and then we're talking about this. Now, I'll kind of weave it in. You know, I've found you'll get to the things eventually organically. But at one time we're starting here, we're ending here, and we're going A, B, C, D. So all that takes time. Researching them, then organizing everything you've researched into a single page. Then the recording, I have a mobile setup where I'll also travel to the guest for convenience. So that's another way you can get bigger guests, is make it as convenient for them as possible. Yeah, I'll come to your hotel. Yeah, I'll meet you in the green room. Wherever is easiest, I'll come to the CBS lot. You know, I'll do it there. Like, I have a mobile setup I've had since pretty much the beginning, since I bought my own equipment, that has just always been reliable and quality. Quality. So recording it, that takes time, the setup, the breakdown, and then you want to take it into the computer and do the fun editing aspect of it, where if you think about a podcast, for instance. What kind of format do you want it to be? Do you want it to just be an interview? Do you want there to be an intro? Do you want there to be an outro? Do you want to have a theme song? Do you want to put a little teaser at the beginning that then goes into intro, all of that takes time. All of it. And it takes more time than you'll think. I can't tell you how many times I've been like, yeah, honey, I'll be right to bed. I'm just gonna edit this real quick. And then like 2 hours later, I'm just like, what am I doing? So all the editing, because I do the format, I do a teaser at the beginning, and then like the intro, and then the episode, and then the outro. But if you want to talk about early on editing, now I just play the episode as is. But early editing, I would say so many times, or I would go yeah after everything they said, or I would say yeah to preface my questions. All these little filler words I would notice listening back, and I would go through, and I would be up till like 3, 4 in the morning, editing out every single filler word. I'm doing the early episodes, go back. I used to think I was Terry Gross, and I was very monotone and just, well, tell me about when you booked that late night gig. I was very like just very serious and like, this is what we need. And then it's evolved into more conversationally. But through that is a lot of dead space, a lot of pauses, a lot of not confident in what you're talking about. But no, I like giving away all my secrets. You still have to do them. Like, if you're willing to do the work, please, we need more people out there creating quality content. So by all means, take this interview, take what I'm saying, and go do it. But it's some crazy stat that like over half of podcasts only have like 10 episodes because they're like, oh, wait, this is work. So a lot of that would be being up late, editing out filler words. Or one person I did over the phone, there was a pause between like every question and answer. There was like a delay. So I went through and edited out all of the pauses to where it sounded like just a single stream conversation. Those are the little details I had early on of just the process of podcasting, because the vision was a quality podcast. Every comedian and their manager has a podcast, so how can mine be different? Well, I want to do quality, well-researched interviews. Well, what does that require? Well, it requires a lot of time researching guests, requires a lot of time editing to make sure the episodes are quality. Now it's become more streamlined, but only because I've just paid the dues along the way. And then, of course, once you get all that done, then you have to upload it. And then you have to share it. And then if you want to do video, that's a whole other woke flow. Woke flow. I said it, a woke flow. You just got woke flowed to how to do your own podcast. Good luck. I think that what sparked my desire to teach is just growing up in a house of educators. One time I did want to be a teacher, and then I was like, but I also want to have money. So I didn't go that route. Decided to go the comedy route, which if you remember at the beginning of this, I said, don't get into it for the money. And here we are. So it's all been just a passion for education. I've always understood the value of education just in growing up in a house of educators. And it took me a while in comedy to realize that's my real mission is to not only be a great comedian, but to also help others be as good as they can be at this. And the class kind of started as I was doing an improv class, and I did some sketch classes at a theater here in Atlanta called Highwire. And then Ian Covell, the owner, just asked me, he's like, hey, have you thought about stand-up class? And I was like, well, I've thought about what I think of people that teach stand-up classes, which is that they're just like swindlers, just hucksters trying to get over on people teaching comedy. But then I thought this could be a good way to teach it the right way, to where a lot of people that take a comedy class from people end up sounding like the teacher, because the teacher you only know what works for you. But what I've found in teaching comedy, the biggest compliment I get from people that graduate is people in the audience saying, that was you, it sounded like you. So I'm not one of these teachers who is writing material for people. Students are in class every week performing their own material that they've written. We'll work together as a group and like brainstorm new jokes together, but it's all up to the comedian. I'm by no means like, oh, you should say this or don't say that. And that's why it comes off so organically and so authentically that authenticity we talked about. Because at the end of the day, it's you up there. And I feel like comedy, even if you don't pursue it as a profession, I think there's something to be said about understanding the skill of stand-up and having that self-sufficiency to be the writer, to be the editor, to be the director, to be the actor, all of it. I look at it as kind of like a Swiss Army knife, to where you have to be everything if you're a comedian. So even if you're not pursuing it full-time, even if you're like a public speaker, or even if you're like into team building, there's something to be said about the self-awareness you gain from trying stand-up that can translate into whatever you're doing. And I've found the results of the class is really what has inspired me to not only build my curriculum, but also I now have my own school, like the Joel Byars Comedy Academy, where I'm teaching people on my own, like my own methodology, my own curriculum, and just seeing the impact that it can make beyond just people being on stage. It's when I see a student do well, it's like as rewarding as when like I do something well on stage. When I see a student do well, I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. It's just like to see people excel at something that is so difficult and so scary. And public speaking is a lot of people's number one fear. So to see people conquer that and see the impact it has on their lives beyond the class, it keeps me teaching them year after year. Well, the big thing I hope my students are achieving is that self-sufficiency. One, a new respect for comedy. A lot of people don't even see the behind the scenes of, oh, you see comedians like on Netflix with an hour special. Oh, you didn't see the 5 hours, the 10 hours of failure that created that single hour. People taking the class now understand that perspective that, oh, this is like a craft that you really have to work at like over and over and over again. It's a new respect for my passion, which is comedy. So that's the number one thing I want students to get out of it, is just a new respect for the craft. But then also the self-confidence that, oh, I can do this. I did this. This was a fear that I was able to overcome. This was a bucket list item I overcome. Or this was reaffirming that I do want to pursue comedy. It's just all, whyever people take the class, I just want to make sure they leave with a new self-confidence and self-awareness that's only going to pour out into whatever their professional endeavor is. And I've seen it firsthand. Like, I'm not trying to regurgitate some like Tony Robbins fortune cookie I read. Like, I've just seen it firsthand enough to understand that that's really the power of comedy, is when you kind of go into that fear, when you press against the fear, you find a whole new world. And what I personally want to get out of teaching, beyond just like the students, is just having that impact. The same thing with the reputation of the podcast I have, is that it's a respectable, quality platform that people can rely on to provide quality content and insight. The same thing with the classes. The whole Joel Byars brand and identity, I just want people to hear my name and think two things. Okay, I'm going to laugh, but I'm also going to learn. That's it. So people can sign up at joelbyarscomedy.com. On there's links to my comedy classes. There's also links to the podcast. Hotbreathpodcast.com is a website I just launched as well, that also, when we're talking about the community, that's going to become kind of the town square where people can start to interact more. So there's a blog on there. There's a bunch of different ways people can start to connect with each other and the podcast. But joelbyarscomedy.com is going to be the best way to get more info about the classes that I'm doing and the workshops and things like that. But also, social media is another good way to connect with me, at Joel Byars Comedy on everything, and at Hot Breath Pod. But that is Byars with an A, and if you spell it with an E, then I don't want your money. Ooh, yeah, I said it. My wife's watching this now, like, no, we want your money. We want your money. Joel has mortgage and a dog that he has to walk instead of paying mortgage. No, I pay mortgage. All right, I pay mortgage, and I walk the dog. I'm a trophy husband. It's a participation trophy, but that one's free, kids. The name of the book is Finding Your Funny, the Comics Playbook. The co-author is actually a student of mine, a former student of mine, who has now gone on to produce his own shows, which is always rewarding as well. But he's actually Dr. Robert Joseph. He actually studied at MIT. He has like a crazy doctorate in math, he's super genius. But he found something inspirational in the class, and he took my second level class as well, and like halfway through it, he just showed up to class with like a binder, and he just goes, "We're writing a book." And he kind of had it mapped out and organized, which, an idea, is a dream until you actually put it into action. So having an idea for a book in a binder is great, and then you realize, oh, geez, now there's a whole other, figuring out the design and what's going to work and making sure there's no typos. But he's another person that found inspiration in the class and saw the value of people learning how to create comedy material just from ideas in their head and make them into actual jokes. So we designed the Comics Playbook, which is pretty much a how-to guide to take a funny thought all the way through the synthesis of a joke, and gives you the whole formula for putting your idea kind of into the hopper, putting it through all these little different techniques and different options and different ideas and different angles and different ways to write a joke. And then at the other end, it spits out like these like everlasting gobstoppers. It's like all that stuff in Willy Wonka was put into this one vat, and then it comes out this little gobstopper, which is a joke, distilled down. So It was kind of like taking my class and distilling it into a book for people that want to take it to shows, or people that aren't in Atlanta but we're still like learn about the comedy writing process. But it was just funny that you just never know who you're going to meet when you're going to meet them. And he was like, we're writing a book. And I was like, oh, cool, we are. And then, several months later, we finished the book. And that's comicsplaybook.com is the website. You can buy that. But that was just another kind of one of those happenings that just falls in your lap. And you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'll write a book. So he was someone who we shared the same enthusiasm for comedy and kind of the math of comedy. And we kind of created a book around it. Luckily, I had a lot of curriculum based around joke writing, so a lot of it was just organizing it into a flow that was like, okay, how to generate ideas. So first off, it's just like finding funny ideas, finding funny thoughts or interesting thoughts. A lot of the best jokes will start out as interesting and not necessarily funny. So a lot of it is generating those ideas, techniques around collecting ideas and organizing them. And then it's once you find them, then you have to start building them. Then you find these techniques to start building in the funny into what you found. And then there's the whole editing process. Like we talked about, 5 hours, 10 hours for a single hour special. You write all this material, then there's editing techniques to start to whittle it down to what is essentially funny about it. And then there's the refining where you try it on stage, and then there's techniques around listening to your material and how to actually start to mold that clay into a finished product. So I had a lot of the curriculum and techniques already in place, but to actually approach it from a formulaic sense took some time. I don't even remember how long, but it was, I would say, several months for us to actually get it from the binder he showed me in class one day to the finished product. Writing a book is so hard. I have new respect. This isn't even like, this is like a workbook. It's not like these novels people write. It's so much work, and there's so many things that go in, even into like, okay, we have this technique. Okay, how are we going to make it fit on this page? Or what do we want each page to say? Or what do we want the back cover to be? Okay, what do we want the cover to be? There's just so many, I'm writing a book. Okay, that's the easy part. The idea is always the easy part. So I learned that through that I thought it was going to be super easy because I already had the curriculum. But to actually organize it and to actually put it into book form, even at that level, it took a long time. And it made me respect everyone else that writes a book, that just all the painstaking process of actually distilling ideas into like a form that people can just carry in their hand. Comicsplaybook.com is where we can buy the book. I'm married, I have a dog, I have a house. I love comedy. I love my wife. I love my life. But that is the funny thing about, especially the comedian lifestyle, is that we're always a comedian. So my wife has sometimes had to be like, hey, I'm not a comedian. You don't have to talk, comedians will, that's why people love comedian podcasts so much. Because, there's a language to comedy, and there's like a shorthand comedians have with each other, where you can just say the most absurd, offensive thing to a comedian, but we won't really get offended because it's just we're talking through comedy. So when you're in conversation with just family or your wife, sometimes you have to remember, oh yeah, she's not a comedian. I need to be a little bit nicer right now. She doesn't take the sarcasm with a wink. She's like, no, I'm here too. Okay, I have feelings. So off stage, I'm a husband. I'm a dog father. I'm a brother. I'm a son. But as a comedian, you really are, you're kind of always a comedian. And to what extent you balance that is requires a lot of trial and error. So since I got married, I will balance out. If I'm booked on the weekends, I won't go out as much during the week and do shows. If I'm not booked on the weekends, I'll go out more during the week. And before she moved down here, that was the first thing I had to tell her was, this is my life. This is what I'm doing. I will be out every single night. And as I've gotten professional and gotten paid work, I don't have to be at an open mic every night. But if I'm not booked that week, I will be out at open mics. It's just the stage, going to the Comedy Store, Dave Chappelle, multimillionaire, he doesn't need this. He's on stage for 2-3 hours, dude. He doesn't need the money. It's just Comedians we just need the stage. So there's a balance to be had within it, but I love my life off stage. It finds me a lot of great inspiration. Without my wife, I would certainly not be sitting here right now. I wouldn't be wearing a branded hoodie next to branded water. Like, it's a game changer having someone in your corner that not only motivates you, but also just inspires you, educates you on like your full potential. It's amazing. I love my wife and comedy. We got married on April Fool's Day, and our officiant was a comedian, and he booed me for crying. It was a lot of crying. It was a suspicious amount of crying. It was almost like I was about to confess something. It was a lot of crying. But she has a great sense of humor, and the fact she let us get married on April 1st, April Fool's Day, I was like, okay, yeah, this is gonna work out. I like being from the South. I like the culture down here. I like the energy down here. I like it's more laid back. It's slower. Like going to New York, I was up there for a week one time. I was like, this was cool, but I could not live here. It's just so much anxiety and so much noise. I like the South. I like being laid back. I've always liked the state of Georgia in general. I mean, I was born here, but there's a lot of cool things to do here in general. Just all the different parks, all just the different historical sightings you can go to around the state. I really am proud to be from Georgia. I think there's just a culture here that a lot of states I don't think have. And being from Atlanta, and like we talked about being a hub and the world's busiest airport, so it's the South, but it's also still kind of like the North in the sense of all the culture here, and it's very diverse, and I think it's cultivating as well, and there's a lot of momentum being built here that I'm proud to be in the middle of. Underrated food. I gotta say, our rehearsal dinner was at Cafe Lily in Decatur, and that's a winner. That place is awesome. We've been back several times since then. Revolution Donuts. My wife and I went to a wedding at a brewery. It was a Tinder wedding. They're still together though. But it was a Tinder wedding at a brewery, but they had Revolution Donuts instead of cake. Those were the bomb.com. And we have since said we're gonna go back. We haven't yet. But though they're doing just like donuts on like a different level in terms of like, it's not just like a Krispy Kreme donut, no offense, but like, a Krispy Kreme donut, you almost just boil those down and just inject them right into your arm. You're just literally doing crack if it's a Krispy Kreme. When they're warm, you don't even chew them. But Revolution, there's like toppings and there's themes. It's incredible. So I would say Revolution Donuts is dope. Banjo Coffee, surprisingly, has really good food. I only knew them for their coffee, but they have really good food as well, and it's locally sourced, and they integrate with a lot of local other companies. They also do this awesome canned nitro cold brew now, which I don't like to drink coffee too much because then I just get like antsy and end up just being busy instead of productive, where the whole time I'm just like, yeah, we're gonna do a lot today. And then like 6 hours later, I'm still just sitting here like, yeah, we're gonna do a lot today. But Fontis Water actually made these, not to shout out Fontis. Yeah, I can't really think of any other. Golda Kombucha though. Have you had kombucha before? It's like expired tea. It's probiotic or whatever. It's really good though. I hope to see Atlanta become even more of a hub for entertainment in general and actually look for talent here. It happens incrementally, but still a lot of the casting and a lot of the opportunities for the talent come from outside the city. But I would like for Atlanta to become like a one-stop shop where they are looking more locally to source their talent as opposed to going back to like LA or whatever to actually get that. So I'd like to see Atlanta do that. I don't even really have a specific vision for where I want Atlanta to be except to just keep going. I don't want us to lose this momentum. I feel like there's a lot of positive momentum, a lot of positive energy culminating in the city. That's why I still live here and haven't moved, because I do like the energy in the city. So I don't know where I want that energy to take us, but I just want to make sure that I'm in the middle of it and that it just continues to grow, because I think it's centered around positivity. There's just like, this is like the hub for hip hop. So I would like that to become also the hub for comedy, the hub for, acting, for tech, for all this. I want it to become just kind of like a one-stop shop city where it's just a destination. Well, I'll end this interview like I end all of my hot breath interviews, and that is by thanking my wife. She made the theme song for the podcast, she made the theme song for my game show, and she made me. So legitimately, at the end of all of my episodes, she made the theme song, which has forever cornered me into thanking her at the end of every episode for thanking her for making the theme song. So like over 170 later, it's become just something I do. So what if every interview I do from here on out, it's like, before we go, thank you, honey, I appreciate you. But she doesn't care. She's going to watch this, unless my dog's in it. If my dog was being interviewed, she would share it. Be like, yeah, Guinness. But it's me. So she's like, oh, there's Joel. I guess he said where he's going to be, That's why I had to get a photo taken. It's like my check-in, just to make sure I'm not out at Revolution without her. I love you, comedy.